I wanted to talk about something today that I think a lot of people overlook when they're talking about shop mechanics. And let me just acknowledge that there's a couple great systems and YouTube channels that address shop mechanics. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I started exploring my own shop mechanics. And that's because I'm an ambidextrous person. I actually write right-handed, but I've always thrown left-handed. So I used to play basketball right hand dominant, and I used to shoot the basketball with my right hand. A couple years ago, 2 years ago, well, 3 years ago actually, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, it seems like your left hand is getting in the way a bit," and I was like, "Yeah, I guess it is. I didn't have a fully two-handed shot, but my left hand was definitely active." So he said, "Why don't you try to put up a couple shots left-handed?" So it didn't feel great originally shooting left-handed. It felt really strange. But I had a more consistent aim with my left hand, and I had more touch with my left hand. Like I've always had better left hand layups and better with my left hand floaters. So I made the full effort to change my shot to becoming a lefty shooter. Now, I encountered a couple difficulties along the way. Um, One of the first difficulties was that my release would end up being too low. So kind of like how Steph Curry shot when he was a freshman and sophomore in high school. Kind of I needed to push the ball out. So to get range, I sacrificed my release point basically. So I worked on getting that up higher and higher and higher, as high as I can. Ultimately, I worked out that on my shot. One of the other problems I had with my shot was my guide hand being too much in the way, kind of like this. And that was just a result of not collecting the ball in the way that I needed to shoot the ball. So I collected too much like this and came in my shot kind of like that. And I just changed my collection to get out of the way. So that came down to my collection, and that came out of experimentation. Um, and then the problem that I'm addressing right now, and it's not much of a problem anymore because I've worked out this problem from my shot, is the the idea of which finger I'm releasing the ball off of. Now, I used to release the ball off of what I would call a four fingers down approach, and what I didn't have is I wasn't spreading my hand out on the ball. I had my hand like this probably on the ball. So I wasn't spreading out my pinky and my thumb very well. And when I would come through the ball, basically I wasn't sure which finger I was releasing off of. It was different. Sometimes it would be the middle finger. Sometimes it would be this. Sometimes it would even be these guys. Obviously, that's a bad shot. But if you look at great shooters, some of the best shooters, and three in specific that I've really seen lately, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Ray Allen, one thing that you're going to see all these guys do, they spread their hand out as much as they can. And I'm a small guy. I don't have a big hand. But when I spread out my hand on the basketball, I have great control of the basketball. Um, and if you look at Michael Jordan's shot, actually, he leveraged the ball in between these two fingers specifically, and he held the ball in them all the way until his release, and he let go. And one of the things you see with Michael's release is his release ends up being here. Kobe's release is this. And Ray Allen's release is like this. All of these guys release off of their middle finger, and there's a couple shot systems on YouTube that recommend shooting off the middle finger. And I'd have to agree. I think that you have the most control shooting off the middle finger for exactly the reasons that they claim. Now, I think one of the most important reasons for having a select finger that you know that you release off of every time is so that there's never any question. There's some guys in the league that are great shooters that you can tell when they release off of different fingers. And one of the things that you can see when they release off of different fingers is you'll see which finger their thumb is in contact with when they finish their release. So you'll see some guys release like this, and their thumb and their middle finger are like this. And you might see the pointer finger out when they release. I think a guy that releases off his middle finger that a lot of people don't notice. But two of the most obvious people that release off of their middle finger are Dirk Nowitzki and Manu Ginobili. You can clearly see Dirk when he releases. You can clearly see him clamping his middle finger with his thumb, and you'll actually see his pointer finger out, which tells me that the ball's not coming off of that finger. And obviously you've seen with Michael Jordan and with Kobe most pronounced that you just see that middle finger down, and the other fingers may not even be down because the release never came in contact with those fingers. Like I could shoot the ball with just these three fingers with great accuracy. So I don't know if there's anything more to say about this subject, but that's something that you might want to think about. Realizing which finger you're releasing off of, and then really focusing on that release point, because that release point is the last part of your hand that's touching the ball. Now let me actually talk about some guys that I think have problems because they're not consistent with how they release the ball. One of the people that has a really inconsistent shot that, in my opinion, really needs to work on it is Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose, other than his guide hand being too much in the front of the ball, which happens a lot of the time, what I'll end up seeing is, and B, he doesn't have a wide shooting hand. It's very narrow. And he'll come through the ball, and you can see very specifically, sometimes he'll curl his hand like this, sometimes it'll go this way, sometimes it'll go that way, sometimes it'll go that way. And a problem that I see with shooters, most of the time when you miss your shot, it's because you're not holding your release the way you released it. You'll see guys that will sometimes release like this, sometimes release like that, sometimes release like that. So, and all of that is, guiding where you shoot the ball. So what I've tried to do is, I used to have a very flailing release hand so that I would release and you'd see my hand flail for a second before it came to rest. And I've just focused on when I release every time, there's no motion. So if you watch Kobe, Ray Allen, and Michael Jordan, the reason I think they have so much consistency and aim on their shot is because their shooting hand, it always stops right after their shot. So their muscles are coordinated to go in exactly that direction every single time they shoot the ball. None of this. It's always right down the middle. But they're so great shooters that do not shoot off this finger, and they don't always follow through exactly straight. One of the guys that is most interesting to me is Klay Thompson. He has a relatively narrow shooting hand when he shoots, and he has a four fingers down technique. One of the other guys that has a really interesting shot that a lot of people look at, I'd have to say, is Steph Curry. And it may look like he has a four fingers down shot, although he doesn't curl with his thumb. His fingers end up like this with his shot. But you can see, if you watch the release point, you'll see this finger coming forward before all the other fingers. And then he'll end up with four fingers down. So, I think that there is a direct correlation between the best shooters having highly, highly, highly consistent releases, especially after the ball is released. You see that hand locked in place exactly where it was, and that just helps build up the muscle memory. And also, these guys release off the same finger every single time, and their collection phase of their shot, before the shot even is up here, while it's still down here at their waist, that's always the same as well. And that's why Steph Curry is so amazing shooting off the dribble, because he's just drilled his collection, and you can see him practicing his collection in a lot of his videos. I think a lot of people forget about footwork and the setup that goes before the shot, and I can make a whole nother video about that, but I'm no expert. I'm just somebody who really enjoys playing basketball, and like I said, I changed my shot from being right-handed to left-handed over the last 3 years. So I started from nothing, and now I'm a pretty decent shooter. So I just wanted to share that and see what people think about that, and see if anybody has any experiences similar like this with themselves.